Nick Offord, re-recording sound mixer for Love and Death. How familiar were you with this case before the show?
Not too familiar. I mean, I had heard about it from the Candy show that was on Hulu, so I kind of done a little bit of research, but I wasn't too familiar before we got onto it. But I started looking into it a little bit once I knew we were doing it, and
Mhm.
just learned how wild of a story it actually really was.
Yeah,
Is
there are a lot of surreal aspects to
Yeah,
the case. Yeah. Is
yeah.
that something that like kind of draws you in when you're deciding on like what projects to join? Like it's like this is true crime, but there's like something else here to this one.
Yeah, I mean, anything that's interesting, like from what I do, it's fun to have a story that like we can do something to heighten it with sound or anything like that. Anytime we can get creative and make it a little bit more interesting, that's always really exciting for us to work on something like that.
hmm So how do you typically start working on a show? Like, do you watch the episodes? Do you talk to the showrunners and the composer and the music supervisor? Because this show also has a lot of music.
It has a lot of music. This one we didn't talk with too many people beforehand when we get started. We did the show with our sound supervisor and designer Brett Hinton, and my mixing partner Ryan Collins, and we also had Kyle O'Neill came in and mixed with those two on it. Um, we had all met beforehand and kind of talked about the show, and Brett had been with Leslie a lot pre-mixing, so he kind of gave us some insight to what she was thinking. So we met and we did a couple episodes, and we met with Leslie, and she was phenomenal to work with. She was so cool about making sure everybody was on board with what we're doing and making it fun. And she said out of the gate that like, if anybody has a cool idea, let's try it and let's see how interesting and great we can make this. And that's just kind of how we approached it.
Mhm. So what was your cool idea?
Oh man, well, there's a lot of things that we went back and forth on, but I think the biggest thing that we were all trying to achieve was tension. That
Mhm.
was the big underlying note. Is like, how can we pull a little bit more tension out of what's happening, whether it's using some of the great design that Brett came up with, or the score from Jeff, or silence.
Mhm.
Can we just use silence and just make it really? If you go to silence, sometimes that creates a lot of tension. So that was a big factor in this mix was how are we going to make it tense, but also fun. I mean, the Candy personality, she's very bubbly, she's very fun. So it was like kind of walking this bridge of like, how do we get in and out of the fun? And that was kind of like what we were doing with the music too. There's so much music. We didn't want getting in and out of music to feel repetitive, so I was trying different ways to get in and out of it to make it interesting, using music to feed into tension, to get out of it. um, so yeah, it was a big collaborative effort.
Mhm. Yeah, I've talked to several of the people involved, like Robin Erding, the music supervisor, and Jeff as well, and Leslie, and they've all talked about like how you all kind of approached the show as like two halves, because the first half is the affair,
Hmm.
is a little bit more playful, because
Yes,
it's like they're happy, and there's a lot more pop music there, and then after the murder, it's like a courtroom drama and
yeah,
less music and more tension.
right.
So yeah, so like what was your approach to like tackling those two halves like that, like just besides like going for the silence in the back half and cutting back on music?
Yeah, I mean, the uh the first half was we wanted to kind of create this world that Candy lived in, right? I mean, it was like your your American dream type scenario. Like she had the family and she says, I have the family and the kids and all that stuff. So we wanted to make it feel light and fun and all that. But in that, we would always cut back to you kind of alluding to what happened, right? There's these flashbacks that happen, there's things there. So we would like introduce some of these darker elements in that. And then I think it's episode 4 on when it starts to get into the courtroom. There's a lot more design. There's a lot more internalization that happens with Candy. Um, like in the courtroom stuff, we didn't want it to just be a courtroom drama of them going back and forth. We had to make that interesting. So we did a lot of things like trying to internalize what's happening with Candy while she's sitting there, and she's kind of, she's on drugs or whatever, she's on the medication to help her stay calm. So there's a lot of like different approaches that we had to take to that turned the show a little bit darker tonally once we hit that kind of mid episode spot.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, like we were saying, like there's a lot of music on the show,
Mm-hmm.
and there it's diegetic and also non-diegetic, and you have,
Mm-hmm.
like sometimes Elizabeth Olsen is singing along to a song
Yeah.
in her car. So how do
Yeah.
you mix that, like versus mixing non-diegetic music that's just playing over a montage?
Well, it's this one, like I said earlier, I wanted to like make it so what didn't seem like we were kind of getting into the music the exact same way every time. So trying to make it a little bit interesting. Like one of the examples when she's singing in her car when she's driving to the lawyer's house, she's kind of like hyping herself up. You
Yeah.
can kind of hear the song playing a little bit in the radio, and she's singing, and she's like,
Take a chance
you
on
can see
me.
her. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yes, she's going in her head, and then it was I came up with the idea of like, let's when she really hits the chorus, let the downbeat of the song kick in full, and she just starts belting it out with the song. It was just like a cool way to get into the song, and it really like felt like propelled us into where she was going. It just seemed very candy, to let that take over. Or in episode 2, when the Bee Gees are playing,
Mhm.
and the claps are taking us in and out of what's happening with the wedding,
Mhm.
while they're at what it's called, where they're kind of redoing their marriage. And
The
Candy's
marriage encounter.
marriage encounter,
Yeah.
yeah. And Candy's dancing, and all the claps are taking us back over there. It was just, we're trying different ways to incorporate, because it would have been boring if it was just playing like in a club, like we had to like make it stylized to work both ways. But there's a lot of things where we cut to it like playing in her house, and it was just finding interesting ways to get in and out of that so it didn't seem repetitive because there was so much music.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. So like when you're working on those edits, like how like are you just in the edit room with like the editors working on it, or is it are they sending you like the cut of the montage?
No, no, they'll send us so that a lot of that stuff will be pre kind of cut already, and then once we do our mix pass on everything, we're gonna kind of see how it sits. We listen to the guides of like what the editor Ben and all the other editors, Amy and some of the other ones have done certain scenes, so it gives us kind of a blueprint of what they're looking for. But then once we get everything else in there and kind of seeing what that episode's doing, sometimes we have different ideas of like, hey, let's try, like that song. I think I Was Me was like, come in on the downbeat and
Mhm.
let's go full on the down. So that way, when she hits that high note, it's just full on. She's kind of taking us into the song, as opposed to just kind of letting the song kind of fade in. Just seemed a little bit more interesting. So it's just like some of those ideas, that we come up with on the fly as we're going, that we would present to Leslie and the team. And, if they liked them, they liked them. If they didn't, we would try something else. So,
Mhm.
and that was
Yeah.
the great part about Leslie. I mean, she was just like an incredible collaborator. She was so open to that kind of stuff, and it
Mhm.
worked really well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about the murder scene, which we see in
Mm-hmm.
the finale through
Mm-hmm.
flashbacks while Candy's testifying. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
going on there too, because there's like the dogs barking, the screams, the blood splatter, the wax of the
Mm-hmm.
axe, and you're cutting back and forth to the trial where, like you said, she's sort of drugged, so she's like kind of like a zombie. So,
Yeah.
how did you approach that scene?
Well, the when we talked about that scene, we wanted it to be just very raw. I mean, and really just intense and real, and it is to try to pull as much out of it as we can without stepping on the performances of what they were doing. So, we were glad that there was no music put over that scene because I don't think it would have played as well. But the performances in their screams and their vocals and everything to me as the dialogue mixer was really important because if we keep they screamed and they sounded so brutal, so we wanted to make sure that those were really playing and cutting through and just had that like kind of almost distortion type feel to it of just this like pain and agony of just complete chaos. And then we would cut away to like the axe hitting the refrigerator, and that had to like really pop and sting. And I think over the course we Brett and Kyle had worked on the effects to where over the course of the as she's hitting, it's building and building and building and building. and then we get like a really big kind of design hit at the end to take us out of it. So it starts off very raw and real, and it stays real for the most part the whole time. Cutting with the dogs, even the dogs, we didn't really do any kind of design work with the dogs. We just let them be there, part of that moment. And then at the end, when she does the final hit, it's like it's kind of just we put a little bit more emphasis on it to kind of take us out, and she's breathing, and
Yeah,
the
you
panic
hear
sets
her
in
like
at that
sigh
point.
at the end when she drops the axe. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah,
a
it's like this.
release of the tension almost.
Exactly. Yes. And then I think we're cut back into the courtroom, and the courtroom we just kept extremely quiet because we wanted that to be very tense. She plays it so kind of almost monotone where it's like nothing to step on what she was saying. So it was a very delicate balance, but I think we were able to achieve like a really intense
Mhm.
feeling, when the murder's happening.
Yeah.
The sounds Brett did a great job of not designing anything like too over the top because we didn't want it to sound like, you know, it didn't call for like a big Hollywood kind of like murder sound. It just needed to be very real, very, very impactful. I think they did a great job with that.
Yeah, for sure. Is that kind of similar to how you guys tackled the hypnosis scene when, she's under hypnosis and, we see flashbacks to this incident from her childhood and you see it's like haunting her. There's another scream there too, but there's
Yeah,
like a lot of tension and not a lot of music.
yeah. That one was fun because we actually built. Brett designed this really cool kind of montage of the mom saying "shh,"
Mhm.
which is extremely subtle, and we mixed it in Atmos in our room, and we had like the shushes being played kind of all over the room, and they would come in and out in this kind of like rhythmic pace while she's starting to go into this memory. So we were kind of using that as like the tension builder coming into this memory as you get into seeing the mom reeling through the hospital. And then even we would do stuff like I think the doctor asked her, "Is that how you feel?" And she said, "Shh," but we would cut the mom saying "shh" over the doctor's lips. So
Mhm.
it kind of takes you back to that
Mhm.
moment. There's little
Yeah.
things like that we did that just to kind of make it weird and
Yeah, it kind of
you
conflates.
know,
It's like a version of prelapse, I guess. It's like,
kind of yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So and then Brett and Ryan and Kyle mixed in this like this or Kyle, I'm sorry, mixed in this like tone, this really like kind of just designy tone to bring it up. And then when we got to the screen, we actually cut everything out. I believe we cut everything out, and I really pushed the screen just so it's like, again, it was the same kind of idea with the screams and the murder, but the scream, I wanted that to kind of hopefully
Yeah,
give
it
people
lingered a
goosebumps.
little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think it cuts the courtroom and there's just a break of silence. Like
Mhm.
the scream happens, and then there's like no, or no, that's later in the episode. But that, the one
But
you're talking
in
about
the yeah, in the his office.
in
Yeah.
his office, yes, in his office, yes, the scream, and then he runs in, the lawyer runs in. But yeah, we wanted the scream to really like people go, oh gosh, like just
It
really
was
feeling that.
intense.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Well, yeah, you mentioned the which is was her trigger word because
mhm.
Betty allegedly said that to her in the laundry room. And the first time we hear Betty say it's pretty quiet, but she repeats it. So just that, and also I guess in general, like how do you go about like making sure dialogue is intelligible in scenes like that, especially when it's supposed to be quiet?
Yeah, I mean, we play with a little bit of like, we don't want to mix it too low because you have to hear it, but there's different techniques we can do to like take a little bit of the edge off, which will kind of make it seem a little bit quieter, but we can also kind of push it up so it's not so far out in front. But when everything gets squished down to go out on TV for the television specs that need to go, it's probably like in real conversation, it's obviously louder than what it would be because we have to make sure that that's clear. But there's different things that we could do to like you put a little compression on it, maybe just to kind of soften it so it doesn't seem like it's that. I mean, the actors are also doing such a great job with their real performance. Even if you turn it up, it still feels like they're whispering.
Mhm.
So you can kind of get away with having it up a little bit for those certain things.
Mhm. What was your favorite sequence to work on?
Oh, that's the episode 4. I think was one of our favorites just as a whole. I think all of us like collectively loved that episode. It just played so well. Like that's when you realize she did the murder. She walks out of the house and little girls running across the street. And all that whole opening 10 minutes, it's
It's
really
like a
intense.
daze because
Yeah,
she can't believe she just did that, and then we don't see the murder yet either. So it's like
right.
what happened, you know?
What happened? Yeah. So we all love that. I mean, I love the murder sequence. I think that sounds phenomenal. And the the BG sequence is a lot of fun. How we did that. I mean, I'm really proud of this whole episode. It's hard to pick one. I mean, whole series. We all left it wanting to keep going. You know, I mean, we had such a great time mixing of them, and that that doesn't happen all the time. And I think that comes from Leslie. I mean, she's so great that we all were like, can we get another episode? Like this is so much fun. We had a blast mixing this show,
Mhm.
and I think it really showed.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you completed your decade trifecta with this because last year you had The Offer, which was in the 70s, and
Oh,
Pam
yeah.
and Tommy, which was in the 90s. This is
Yeah.
it goes into a late 80s or early 80s, late 70s, early
Yeah.
80s. So, but how would you describe like the differences between these vintage sounds? Obviously, they're all different shows too, but they're all true stories as
They're all
well.
true stories. Yeah, that's interesting. That's funny that I didn't even think about it like that. But um, Pam and Tommy was really fun because we used a lot of like 90s type sounds, especially, the composer used all these amazing sounds in the score. So like modem sounds and VHS clunking and all this really cool stuff. Um, so I mean, it's kind of just we just want to make the time feel real. I remember on The Offer we talked about the golf carts driving around the lot, and we were like, were they electric or were they gas back then? We had to like,
You have to research
make sure.
Google.
Yeah, we had to like double check it and like were the right back beep sounds for when trucks back up on the lot, were they time appropriate. So there's like a lot of conversations that go into this stuff, um, to make sure that we're in the right you know era. But yeah, it's always interesting. It's fun doing that. Like Pam and Tommy for me, because I was like 90s kid, was like a flashback
Yeah,
in time. I was like, oh, I remember the modem sound when the dial-up was
like
happening.
haunting AOL, the dial-up. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So this one was a little bit before my time, but it was still
Just
cool
great
to like
music,
see
of course, timeless
great
music.
music.
Yeah.
The music was spot on. Like they did an amazing job with the music, and the way Elizabeth Olsen played all the scenes where she's dancing to it, and it's just like it's great. It's great.
Mhm. Yeah, sure. Well, lastly, you have two shows coming next month, highly anticipated, Justified, City Primeval, and the After Party season two. So what can you share about working on those?
Um, uh, After Party is the first time I worked with Chris Miller, and he's like a genius. He's like one of the nicest guys too, and that was really fun to be able to work on something where it's like every episode is a new movie. So the
It's a
scores
mind movie.
changed. Yeah, totally. And so it was really fun to work on that and just try something different. Like I said before, it's like anytime we get the chance to do something different and interesting, it's really exciting for us from like sound people.
Mhm.
So every episode was different. So it was really fun to do that. So I'm really happy that I got the opportunity to do that. And Justified's great. I worked with Michael Dinner a few times, and he loves sound. Like he comes in and sits there all day, every day, and he's totally into it. He wants to hear big sound and the surrounds and action, and he's totally into it. So it's a lot of fun whenever I get the
And like
chance to work
a
with him.
Western, and this season is set in Detroit, so that's like ripe for
It's
sound. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. There's some really cool like sound moments. Um, I don't know how much I could say. I wish I could like dive into it because there's some cool stuff that we did, but I don't want to give anything away. But it's working with Michael Dinner is fun because he's such a sound guy, and
Mhm.
and so he likes to really go for it.
Mhm. Well, everyone will watch them both next month, so we'll
Yeah,
hear
I'm
it all.
excited. Yeah,
Um, well, Nick, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your
you
time,
too.
and
Thank you.
congratulations again.
Thank you so much.